Hello and welcome to the show. My guest today is from Italy and he came here to Germany originally in 1998 to get his PhD at the European Molecular Biology Laboratory in Heidelberg. Giovanni Frazzetto is a neuroscientist and an author. He now lives here in Berlin where he works for the Institute for Advanced Study.
Hello.
Welcome to the show. My first question is very simple. What is the Institute for Advanced Study? What goes on there?
It's heaven. Imagine a set of villas in the woods around a lake where you can go and read, study, and discuss ideas with other like-minded people. It's an institute that attracts scholars from all disciplines. You can be a philosopher, you can study mathematics, physics, biology, sociology. You can be a musician, a writer, or an artist. You're invited for a year, and the only obligation you have is to have meals together with your colleagues and talk about something intelligent most of the time.
Well, yes, it does seem like... And you say you were invited. How did that come about?
You are a fellow for a year. You get a letter. Somebody nominates you.
Oh, you can't apply?
You can also apply.
I expect there are quite a few.
Both ways. Yeah. And then you're invited for a year, and you spend 10 months in total there. And the only expectation is that you produce something at the end, but...
Well, what do you have to produce? Or tell us, what do you...
Most people come to write a book. Mm-hmm. But we increasingly have also biologists who come to the Wissenschaftskolleg. I used to be a fellow. I was a fellow in 2007 when I first moved to Berlin, and I work at the institute as staff. So I'm responsible for a program called College for Life Sciences, a program within the institute that attracts young biologists, scholars from the life sciences, who want to be immersed in this interdisciplinary environment, so to gain time to think about the research.
But you don't teach them, then?
I don't teach them. I mentor them. I select them together with a board, of course. Yeah. And then when they are at the institute, I mentor them, I talk to them, we exchange texts and readings. I follow more or less... I follow them through their fellowship, but they got the ultimate freedom to spend their time as they please. So it is heaven.
Like heaven. And who funds this?
It is funded both by the city of Berlin and also federally by the state of Germany. And there are also some private donors who sometimes generously give money.
So it's not an international organisation?
It is primarily... It is a German institution, but it is international in the sense that it attracts international scholars. So,
and do you have contacts with other like-minded institutions around the world and exchange things?
Yes, absolutely. There are other institutes for advanced studies within Germany, and then the Wissenschaftskolleg, this is the German name, also has links with other institutes for advanced studies in Europe and the rest of the world. And we try to attract scholars from all corners of the world and all pathways of wisdom, so to speak. So,
I mean, is Germany the best place to be a scientist?
Germany is very good with science. I find it's very well supported, very good structure and good funding.
You're also one of the founders of the European Neuroscience and Society Network. Now, what's the purpose of this? Slightly different, I assume.
Yes, this is something that I started when I still lived in London. This was an idea that colleagues and I had to bring neuroscientists closer to other thinkers, to scholars from the humanities or from sociology, from social studies of science, because we were very interested in the societal impact that neuroscience has. And so for 5 years, we had money from the European Science Foundation to organize meetings, to set up schools, and try and educate, especially young scholars, to think differently early on in their career. Neuroscience is a field that has enormous societal implications and cultural implications. So instead of just working in the lab and carrying out your dedicated project, we encourage them to open their minds and to exchange ideas.
I mean, tell me a little bit about neuroscience in that I remember I met a neurologist once. I was very impressed by him because the first thing he said to me is, by the way, we only know 20% of what's going on up here. 80% is guesswork theory. Is that true, or this was a few years back?
It is. I think it's important to be humble in neuroscience. It's a fascinating field of research. But it encompasses so much of who we are. It's about our movement, speech, language, emotions, behavior, memory, personality, and perhaps everything under the umbrella of consciousness. That's a lot to grapple with. It's a lot to explain.
Is it frustrating, though, that we don't know what... It's all a grey matter here. Isn't that frustrating?
It is as fascinating as it is frustrating at times. But whatever you do, you should never give up. Study the brain, because it will be a contribution to a larger goal.
You've written a book about it called How We Feel, with a subtitle that says, What Neuroscience Can and Can't Tell Us About Our Emotions. That's quite interesting, because you are saying, yes, there's lots it can't tell us as well, but there is stuff that it can tell us.
Yes. I decided to write a popular science book for everybody to read and appreciate all the great things about science and about the science of the brain, but also be conscious and aware about the limitations. So what neuroscience can't tell us about emotions is mostly the experience of emotion. So experience. It cannot.
It cannot tell us about the experience.
Yes. So really how we feel when we're going through an emotion. There's something so personal, so subjective. And so we can now look inside the brain to see what happens in a certain condition, in certain circumstances. We can measure all kinds of hormones, look at the genes, proteins. But ultimately, during our daily lives, that's something, what we feel, that's something that science cannot describe in detail. But that is also okay. Yeah.
Okay, we'll look inside the brain.
Therefore, you need something else too.
We'll look inside the brain a little more in a minute. But right now, let's have a look round Berlin with Giovanni right now.
This town has got so much to offer. There's so much culture. It's got the best orchestra in the world, fantastic museums. It attracts a lot of artists, especially visual artists, writers. And so you can produce a lot and feel the excitement about producing art. If there's one thing that I have cultivated a lot while I was here, that's theatre. It's a pleasure to dream for a couple of hours and be captured into a different world. Shakespeare's Sonette. This is my favorite show here at the Berlin Ensemble. I love Shakespeare, I love the sonnets very much. I think I've seen it 6 times in total. This is typically German.
It's typical German, yeah, Black Forest.
I'll have a piece of the Schwarzwälder Kirsch, bitte. Danke sehr. Thank you. Thank you. So here we go. We got the cake. Look at it. It's a challenge, isn't it? They like using cherries. As, something sour in the middle of the cake. And for me, that's something I can't really deal with. perfect thing to do after work, after a hard day's work, coming to a lake, renting a boat, and do some rowing. Ah, this is perfect. It's just what you need. It is important for me to spend some time close to the water. It reminds me of home, reminds me of Sicily. A lake is not exactly the Mediterranean Sea, but it's good enough for Berlin, and this puts me in a good mood. Done, almost there. Inline parking. Inline parking is a challenge.
My guest there, parking his boat, indeed. And I want to come back to the book in a minute, but I have to talk to you about German cuisine. That was a huge piece of cake, wasn't
Unbelievable.
it?
Yes.
Because I know you love this country very much, but you do have a problem with the cuisine generally. It's not just the cake.
It's not just the cake. Correct. I like German food. I like to have Wiener Schnitzel sometimes. Well, maybe that's Austrian, but I like sausages and cabbage. I like that. So currywurst, something you can have very easily in Berlin. But there are a few things, especially about cakes or coffee and tea, that I find very difficult for me. For instance, they serve tea in a glass. A lot.
Yes.
And I had a problem with that because, and I was very surprised that they would serve tea in a glass. And I always ask them, do you have a handle? Because if you don't have a handle, you scorch your fingers. You can't actually drink that tea.
I've never, as an Englishman, tea drinking, of course, I've never thought of that, but that's true. Yes, yes.
The cakes are huge. They've got a lot of cream. They like using cream a lot.
But you said about the cake being sour. Now, if I can take you to task here, Italian cakes are only sweet. French cakes are sometimes. I mean, tarte au citron is not always sweet. So
Italian cakes are often very sweet. And where I come from, Sicily, there's a lot of sugar. There's a lot of sugar. We even have a type of sorbet called granita, which is a huge injection of sugar into your system, but it's delicious. And sometimes we have it for breakfast when it's too hot, together with a brioche.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. And you've got a sauce problem and a cream problem here, I heard.
It's a lot of cream. They use it everywhere, and the sauces are not thick enough. So when you eat pasta with a German sauce, you need to defend yourself with a napkin, or learn and train better not to get.
But I mean, presumably, you live here, so you don't starve. No.
I like cooking for myself.
I should actually, at this point, I think there is another reason why you're where is it? Yes, here it is. Oh, no, that's the wrong... Why does that do that? Machines.
Ha.
Your 10th birthday party, a lovely picture, and there's a cake.
There's a cake.
And is that mum or dad?
Mum and dad. Cakes were important for birthday parties, and it was a team. They make cake together. Mum was responsible for the bulk of it, so she would make the cake, but Dad was responsible for the decoration and the final touch. And every year they tried to make it different.
Yeah. Now, let's come back to the book. Now we've sorted out German cuisine. What can science... I mean, I'm intrigued, if I can ask basic question, what can science then tell us about our emotions today? You said there are things they can't tell us, you told us that before, but what can it tell us then?
There's a great deal that we know. Well, first of all, science tells us that emotions are bodily reactions. Emotions are all about our body. And it's not just the brain. It's governed by the brain, but an emotion involves our respiration and our blood circulation. We sweat, for instance. And we also communicate emotionally through our body. It's all governed by the brain, but it involves the entire body. We know about what parts of the brain are involved for certain emotions. We cannot map them so closely, but we know more or less where things go on, and we can look inside the brain through a technique called functional magnetic resonance imaging. Slowly, we are finding out what genes are involved, but we always need to remember that there are many genes involved and underlying one emotion. We can look at behavior in animals for forms of the emotion. So it is for sure a fascinating world. One can learn a lot from. But for instance, when we talk about the fMRI, the imaging, it is still, for a lot of money has been invested in it, it is still sketchy. We can't tell exactly where an emotion is being felt. And also, it's not just one area for it, but various areas will be involved.
One of the chapters in your book is about grief, and I recently read that grief has been quantified, that if it goes on longer than 2 weeks, it becomes abnormal and it's considered depression and needs to be treated. I mean, surely a time limit can't be put on grief. I mean...
Yes, there's no rhyme or reason to how long, one ought to grieve for the loss of somebody. Grief is the price we pay as human beings for loving somebody. It's the natural price we pay. And what you just mentioned is a move by the American Psychiatric Association. And it is also a cultural event, if you like. Perhaps, emotions are bodily reactions, but culture contributes to that. It is true now, if you grieve for longer than 2 weeks, you are entitled to earn a diagnosis of depression, to be considered depressed. Perhaps because society doesn't want you to be depressed, and it could be
the pharmaceutical industries trying to sell drugs.
There's a lot of interest in that, for sure, to sell, antidepressants.
I mean, let's go. There's a chapter on guilt, and I must ask you about that. I mean, in principle, it's good that we feel guilt, isn't it? Otherwise, we'd have no morals.
Yes.
Yeah.
All emotions have a function, so they have evolved within us for millions of years. So all emotions have a function. The function of guilt is for us not to repeat the same mistakes. However, we go back to culture here, because what do we feel when we feel guilt? What happens when we feel guilt? We may perhaps locate it in the brain, or see if it's the frontal part of the brain that is active when we have a feeling of guilt. But in certain contexts, do not reproach on certain actions. So we will be feeling guilty for something in one society, but not in another society. So we are equipped to feel it, but culture plays a role.
You talk about one society, another. Talking about this society in Germany, Germany's had its fair share of collective guilt from a historical point of view. Do you think it's dealt with it well?
If it's dealt with it well, I see a lot of guilt around. I must say, and it is not beyond the collective memory, which is crucial and very important. We must distinguish between our personal and the collective. That does play a role. I see guilt as a very widespread emotion. I must say. Perhaps I mistake guilt for care. Germans want to do things well, so if something goes wrong, they feel guilty for it, and they're immediately apologetic for something that went wrong. I remember entering a shop once and buying a present for friends, and the shopkeeper, instead of welcoming my purchase, said, "Oh, well, I don't have the box for what you just picked." That was an expression of guilt, I thought. And
yet they were trying to sell you something.
Doesn't matter.
Okay. Let's move on to joy.
Yes.
and now, and in the chapter on joy, music becomes very important. I mean, I showed this with a picture, but ask you, how important is music in your life? Now, here's a side of my guest you wouldn't have thought. Here he is in a rock band.
This is graduate school, Heidelberg. Toward the end of the PhD, colleagues and I formed a band. We were called The Pranks.
And that's a good name, actually.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, it is, isn't it?
So we covered, other bands, and I was singing and playing the guitar. And music is emotion. It's really the. I think Leo Tolstoy said it's the shorthand of emotions. It really grips us. It talks directly to us and to our bodies. So it is only natural.
It's important in your life, and you say it's very important with emotions and with science as well. It's, you know.
Yes, slowly we are discovering what goes on. I mean, a lot about brain and music at every level. So what happens when we hear it, when we like it, when we don't like it. For instance, what happens when we feel the chills in our bodies? We are sitting in an orchestra room at the Philharmonic in Berlin, and we feel the chills. So we know more or less what goes on there. But there's still a lot. There's still a lot to discover.
But it brings us very nicely to our next report. Let's go to the Max Planck Institute here in Berlin, where they've been doing experiments with musicians to see basically how their brains synchronize with each other when they play together.
Johanna Zenger loves listening to music, but she's also interested in the scientific side of what's happening when musicians play together. To successfully create a harmonious sound, the brains of the players have to be coordinated in pursuit of a common goal. The researcher believes that this neurosynchronicity occurs when the brains of musicians playing together create a neurological meta-network. According to her, the phenomenon can be described as a kind of communal brain.
Everybody has seen images of brain waves at the doctor's office or on TV. You can picture them in a very simple way as waves, and when the two guitarists are playing together, their brain waves are oscillating in the same way. That doesn't necessarily mean that the peaks and valleys of the waves come at exactly the same time, but that the intervals between the peaks and valleys are the same.
These guitarists often feel a communal brain at work when they play together.
You feel it with certain processes, and when you play faster or slower, at some point the dynamics just work automatically.
What happens in our brain when we're playing together? I'm really curious to find out. I find it fascinating.
The research team found that the duo's brainwaves synchronize when they play a duet together. Zenger now wants to know whether the waves also oscillate in tandem when Viola Weise and Duncan Taylor are playing different parts. In this scenario, their two brains have to coordinate continuously. Duncan plays the introductory bars. Even before the two-part section of the piece begins, his brainwaves are oscillating in tandem with Viola's, a spectacular result.
We've observed synchronization both within each of the individual brains and between them. What's interesting about this is that the synchronization doesn't remain the same throughout the piece the two are playing. Instead, they are particularly synchronized at certain points in it, especially when they start a section together. We believe that these moments of coordination between the two are very significant, and that this is why the synchronization between the brains then becomes stronger.
Dann auch die Synchronisation der Gehirne stärker wird.
A neurological network also appears when several musicians play together. At this experimental concert, the brainwaves of some of the audience members are being recorded as well. And there are indications that their brains are also involved in or are responding to the network.
It does rather look as though they're all at the hairdressers, waiting for a haircut and being serenaded by guitars. I mean, do you think there's going to be a lot more progress in the future with this area, in that you're very musical yourself, you love music, you love culture generally, and you say there is an association of science. Do you think that's something that will progress much more in the future?
Yes, I think so, and I hope so. At the same time, there's a lot more attention on positive emotions lately. So joy belongs to that, and music can help us achieve joy. Can play an instrument that we can sing, and this will perhaps help us going into a better mood. And it's not just something trivial to say. And your body trains, and the more you smile, for instance, the more you'll be likely to smile in the future, and it's also better for your health rather than being grumpy. This is proven. this we know.
Yeah. Well, it's the same as with the singing, isn't it? They've proven, I don't know what they're called, the things you most probably do. Well, that when you sing, things come out in your body that make you positive, make you joyous. Positive. Pheromones or something, aren't they?
Hormones in general.
Yeah.
But, this is something that even the fathers of psychology used to say. William James said, if you're in the woods and you're afraid, whistle. It sounds trivial because you might be in danger, but the body will respond to what you have decided, and will follow the order, in a way.
So whistling is positive
training
as well.
yourself, to divert from negativity to something more positive. And mindfulness too.
Now, it's all very positive, that. And we've got a signed copy of my guest Giovanni Frazzetto's book to give away. It's called How We Feel. I haven't read it all, but what I have read is fascinating and a real insight into so many things about our behaviour. Anyway, if you'd like to have a copy of this, drop us a line to insight@dw.de and you could be the lucky winner. Feel joyous, feel positive. It could be you. So drop us a line, insight@dw.de. I want to go back like a good psychotherapist to the beginning, to the childhood. You come from, I've said Italy, but actually from Sicily.
Yes.
From, am I pronouncing this? And from Francofonte. Francofonte.
Yes.
Oh, I nearly got it right. But they have got it right on the map. What was it like to... you said you missed the water in our report, because obviously you're in Sicily. Yes. What else do you miss from there? Apart from the cakes, please.
Apart from the family cakes. Francofonte is on a hill. You get a very, very nice view on the Mount Etna, on the volcano. And... Francofonte is the only orange groves. It's full of oranges, and very good oranges. So I missed that, especially during the winter. It was a small town where to grow up, 15,000 inhabitants, but it was also not far from the sea, and I really enjoyed it. It's mentioned twice in an opera, Cavalleria Rusticana. Nobody knows about my hometown, but opera lovers might. It's where the main character goes to buy wine, but back some time ago.
I wonder about how can I put this, the other cliché one might have about Italy, and Cavalleria Rusticana has made me think of it. Is it a dangerous place to be where you come from? Is that just a total cliché?
Partly. As I grew up. I
should show this just at the same time, because this is such a cute photo. As you're growing up, you say as you grow up. Let's show the photo, the cute photo that you sent us. Here he is singing. 3-4
years old in Syracuse when we were visiting my aunt, my father's sister in the garden. Yes, my parents. It used to be perhaps an edgy place. In the 70s and the 80s, mafia was at the peak of its existence. So occasionally you might hear sirens, and there would be shootings in big towns, but it no longer occurs, and we were safe.
Moving on to, I think, Venice. If I've got this right. Have I got this right?
Yes, it is right. This is Venice, 1982. I was 5 years old. My family and I all went to Austria, and we stopped in Venice. We drove there with a trailer. And this is a picture that Dad took of my sister and myself on a Vaporetto. It's perhaps the best picture he took of us, and we're really fond of it in the family.
Very fond one of that now. And when did your interest in science start?
When I was about 16, I've always wanted to do all sorts of things, perhaps a doctor, or only wanted to learn languages or study literature. And then at 16, I read an article in Scientific American about how genes are expressed and how an embryo develops and why do we have a leg where we have it, or the brain, etc. And I thought that was something everybody had to do.
and you hadn't done sort of biology or sciences in school before then? Or
I had biology classes.
Yeah.
But when you read, regional research, you get fascinated by the discovery and how they discovered that. In school, you didactically learn what's there to learn, but if you read an original article, it makes it all more exciting. And that was the moment when I decided to study biology.
Oh, OK.
Yeah, I was 16.
Yeah. Now, we have a questionnaire, a famous questionnaire on the programme, and you answered it in great detail, being a scientist, of course. And I just want to ask you, really, for now, we'll talk about it a bit more, but there's a couple of things. First of all, I wanted to ask you about the worst thing about living in Germany. Your answer, I felt for it, when you said the absence of the Mediterranean Sea. Well, I can't help you there. But you said having to deal with the gender of nouns.
Oh, yes. Mark Twain had it right in its essay, The Awful German Language. I think I will never get it right. It's tough. It's a tough one. Even if you've spoken German for some time, at least this is what I experienced.
We should, as a juxtaposition, say the best thing about living in Germany. Do you remember what you said about the trains?
Yes, punctuality. Having grown up in Sicily, for me, the idea that you can show up at the platform and know exactly when the train arrives is indeed a gift. It's marvellous. I know it is another cliché, but sometimes if I'm about to catch a bus, I look from the window where the people have started to gather at the station. Then I know I need to come down because the bus... Really, I can't keep schedule, so I will never look it up, but...
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, but you know it will arrive...
I know it will arrive if people are gathering.
And they come pretty regularly,
too. They do.
That's the thing as well. One thing we ask our guests as well is to make up your own categories, and you did make up a category. You said your non-favourite German sentence.
Es geht nicht.
How would we translate that?
It's
kind of no can do, or
no
can't do that.
Can't do that. Reticence. The first reaction is no, and very rigidly so. But perhaps without having really looked at the problem from another perspective, or perhaps change the plan. This is something that I have. I clash a little bit because.
Okay. And also, your favourite place in Germany, so many people put Berlin, but actually, you've put Heidelberg. What's so special about Heidelberg, where you studied for 5 years?
For about 5 years. Yeah. This was graduate school at the European Molecular Biology Laboratory. Yeah. It was an enchanting place. I was coming from London, so at the beginning, Heidelberg felt rather small. But then, together with the rest of the class, the graduate school, we were working hard and playing hard too. It's full of nature, and there's a river, you can hike, you can run. It's full of culture, there's a film festival, lots of music. It's very international. And I created and established very good friendships there.
Well, we have something for you now. Let's have a look at what has to be one of this country's loveliest cities.
The American writer Mark Twain visited the city of Heidelberg in 1878 and was profoundly impressed, writing, "I have never enjoyed a view which had such a serene and satisfying charm about it as this one gives." Even today, Heidelberg has lost none of that satisfying charm. Heidelberg's best-known landmark is located on Königstuhl Hill, Heidelberg Castle. Resplendent on its hillside, the ruined castle overlooks the old town, which survived the Second World War unscathed. Heidelberg is a university town, and a fifth of its residents are students. The main street in the town is a shopping precinct and open-air museum in one. The neighbourhood is steeped in history, with every winding lane leading to another local landmark, such as the Baroque Jesuit church. The University of Heidelberg is Germany's oldest. Its old assembly hall was built in 1885. The fresco shows Athena, the Greek goddess of wisdom. An aura of scholarship and learning permeates the premises. To mark the university's 625th anniversary, the library put its pride and joy on display: the original Codex Manesse. The 14th century illuminated manuscript is the single most comprehensive source for love songs in Middle High German. In the 16th century, the university opened a Studentenkarzer, or student prison, where carousing students were kept off the streets for up to 4 weeks at a time and fed bread and water. On the northern side of the river Neckar is Heiligenberg Hill and the Philosopher's Walk, so called because it was here that Heidelberg's philosophers and professors traditionally came to walk and talk and enjoy the panoramic views. At one end is a monument to the Romantic poet Friedrich Hölderlin and his famous ode to Heidelberg.
Did you ever get thrown in that student prison?
No, likely not. I was a good student.
I do believe, though, that Berlin is where you prefer to live now, though, for other reasons. What's so special about Berlin, then?
It is a large city, first of all.
Yeah,
the size is different, and I like, to be surrounded by a lot more people. I wouldn't say Berlin is so international. Of course it is, but it's not a cosmopolitan town. Not yet. It's becoming.
Why is that? Why is it not cosmopolitan?
It's not full of, it's not ethnically diverse, I would say. It's not like London. It's not like New York.
No.
That's the comparison I was making. But otherwise, from the cultural point of view, Berlin is extremely interesting and stimulating. There's so much art. There's a lot of young people with great ideas. And it has become a harbor, I think, for artists from all over Europe or the world. The orchestra is fantastic.
Yeah.
It's good theatre too.
Yeah. Now, you just said you worked in London, you've been in Heidelberg and Berlin. Are there marked differences in styles, the way scientists, the way the science community works, if you see what I mean?
Yes. Well, I don't have a lot of experience in Italy, actually, no, because I left before I entered, the world of research. I left when I was 18, and my experiences are England and Germany, and I had a great time in both places. Perhaps, as far as I am concerned, England and the UK are even better when it comes to science communication and this encounter between science and the arts. There's a lot of interest in bringing science to the public. There's a great tradition there.
I mean, your book's in English?
Yes.
Or is it published in German as well?
It is also published in German. It's called the Gefühlscode.
Okay.
They changed the title, but it's the same book.
Sort of works with what you're saying, that it's been published in English. It's had it says often illuminating and inspired, right up there from the Times. They're obviously are they showing more interest there in that side of things as well? I mean, you say they're better at it. Are they showing more interest too?
Oh yes, it's going well. I started it at presenting the book at the Edinburgh Festival last year when it came out, and I also sense a great response when I give talks, And if I present it in England, I think it's a book that I wrote thinking of an Anglo-Saxon audience. There are many references to that culture, and this is what I could retain from having lived there too.
One thing I just noticed in the press the other day, we haven't got a lot of time, but the US announced it's about to invest $4.5 billion in trying to crack the code as to how the brain functions. Is this possible to do you think?
Not in our lifetimes, I'm afraid, Robin. But it is a great initiative. It reminds me of what the investment in the coding of the genome about 15 years ago, in the 90s, and now with the coding the brain. It is a daunting task, but I find it extremely important that even more and more funds are devoted to this. There will be something to talk about. Students will have jobs, and there will be
What's next for you? We're almost out of time, but what's
I'm thinking. I'm working on another science book, but I'm also trying to finish a collection of short stories, and I started writing a novel that will probably never finish. But
Really?
Yes.
Why don't you think you'll finish it?
I was just being...
No, but you've got... I know you write poems as well and write theatre plays too?
I've written for theatre, yes, here in Berlin.
Yeah?
Actually, twice.
A fascinating man, I think you'll agree, ladies and gentlemen. Giovanni Frazzetto, thanks very much for joining us.
For having me, Robin.
Just remind you of the book once again, How We Feel. It is fascinating. It's opened my eyes to many things, and you can win this if you write to us at insight@dw.de. Possibly win it, I should say. There's only one winner, but it gives a lot of joy. We'll finish on that note. Giovanni, thanks very much. Thank you. Until next time, bye-bye.